We are live. Hello, folks.
Hey, hey, Sam
Good
Karen
evening.
here. Watch me work. Best of episode. I'm completely pumped to look back at all these gems of the episodes.
Yeah, some amazing processes that folks have shown us. So
Yeah,
I can see everything is working on the channels.
comments. If anyone, I want to see those firing up. There's lots of love for all the artists in all the episodes. So I think it's if you loved anything from before, now's the time to get a bit of a recap and just love a deeper dive into a couple of them.
If you're watching on Twitter, I think that's the only place that you can't directly ask us any questions. So you can jump over if you'd like to YouTube or the LinkedIn event,
Yeah.
and there you can ask us questions, and we can get to them. Yeah, just give
Cool.
folks another second.
Yeah.
Pull out slideshow.
Yeah, it's a really nice feeling to be able to kind of just see the variety. Just speak it. I don't want any spoilers, but from behind the scenes, seeing just all the different artists, the different styles, medium, and yet being so interconnected at the same time.
Yeah, it's incredible, all the connections actually. Across very different processes, but can you see me on this screen then?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're watching a Best of Watch Me Work, which is a series of live events that features digital artists and creators leveraging, working in open culture and leveraging, the assets, the digital assets and tools out there made possible through Creative Commons licensing, as well as public domain and open source communities who are amazing. And this episode was supported by the Creative Commons 20th anniversary grant. It's 20 years of Creative Commons movement.
20 years. It's big.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting time. I think the next 20 years could look really, really amazing and focused around, again, the creatives and what we can do with all of this stuff that the Creative Commons has fought to make available, and how we can kind of really affect a larger culture of shared understanding of what it means to open and share. And
big undertaking, but
it is a
one worth doing for sure.
Definitely worth doing. Definitely, it's always difficult to it's a complex ecosystem, and it's a complex world, and it's a complex solution, and at the same time, we're not living in a world where people are like, let's have a long dialogue, right? It's
I mean, it has to be at 20 characters.
Yeah. And that's a huge part of the problem with all of this kind of technology stuff, right? Is that it really needs deeper dives, and where do we have deeper dives with as many folks as possible, so that it's can actually have that change that larger cultural.
Yeah, for sure. And dialogue is what it's all about, right? That's what I love about this. It kind of just gets you that point behind the screen, and you just get to have that conversation.
Yeah, and see what I think that's a really huge, because I was meeting with the GLAM group, the Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museum, which is the largest kind of engaged group in Creative Commons work, and they were so surprised. There was a number of them had said to me after, you spend so much time stewarding these collections, and you really don't know if anybody's out there using them.
Right.
One of them was a steward of a collection. I think it was 100,000 photographs. And one day it had gone down. And, it was amazing how many people had contacted them, like, oh my God, what's happening? And they were like, wow,
yeah.
This is really, these are, this is these people's materials. It's not there.
yeah, it's significant. It's not just I mean, yeah, we think it's not just ones and zeros or like, you know, physical. It's actual labor. It's people's, you know, time and passion, and yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. So yeah, we've met so far with yeah, we've talked about in the past episodes using CC and AR, your use of open source for VR,
Yeah.
James Kerr's Scorpion Daggers, animating of museum works in the canon, mostly Renaissance, but others as well. Dana McLeod and generative AI. Sonia Mwambu and remixing archives. Illis Preacher, Kofi, aka Kofi Oduro, and his live coding. So, yeah, we've done some pretty interesting.
It's been all over. I think it's just been all over the map in terms of just styles, but also technique. Each time has been just a new piece of software, a new approach to Creative Commons material, video, sound, image, text. Yeah, it's been all over.
Mm-hmm. And like you were just saying before we went live, there's so much. I mean, obviously AI now too is there's you know, ChatGPT. Like you can't just talk about one type of AI. But
I've heard that like 1,000 times in like the last couple of weeks. I should get a penny jar, a ChatGPT penny jar that just.
Yeah, you'd be. Yeah. Yeah, and like you were saying, Meta, like just the entire, you know, the entire world of, you know, all of this stuff of the last 20 years and digital assets and the digital abundance now in our more spatial and social environments. And of course, music we talked about. We definitely got to get into with some from remixing musicians and you know, so many of the copyright kind of issues that are there. But today is for looking back.
So I'm just before you look ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to show folks, the little highlight reel of the 5 episodes so far for folks that haven't seen any full episodes. Let me know if you can't hear it or if there's any issue, please.
Basically, the Shirley card was like a reference for shooting film to like calibrate it, and she was a white woman, so that helped enable the racial biases in film and television in terms of like characters, stories. So I shot classic films in like black and white, and then juxtaposed them with what images that I shot, sort of like recreating those scenes with black actors, like this. But I knew I wanted it to end with, you know, my own Shirley card. So that's one thing that I love about working with found footage, exploring different archives. And, you know, I can't speak with the people who came generations before me, but I can interact with them on this timeline where I'm inputting my own voice into what they were saying. And then 20 years from now, somebody else might find it. And I hope somebody else would find it and then remix it into like their own.
The internet has a lot of greatness. Always wanted to code music. So then I got into processing around 2014. On the path, I started realizing I can do animation, I can do audio visual, I can do installation. So then I just told myself I'm always going to try to mix everything together. And most of the time I just experiment, right? And I think it also helps that I know a lot of people that have developed tools. So one of the things that I really do is like take their tools and try to break it in like a meaningful way. And I use tools that other people have built and I just change it to something else. And then it starts becoming a discussion on what is language.
Like I try to build everything from Renaissance paintings. I'll go into the Met folder and these are all public domain, Creative Commons, even for commercial for use.
Wow. Okay.
So like I'd go in and I just like cut out a little, like, you know, a part of the brick wall here and make my own brick wall, for example, or I take the collar off this shirt or the necklace off this lady and make some new things. This is a random character generator I'm working on with my friend Tyson Parks.
Awesome.
We took different, all these mouths and noses.
Is this something that you will put out that people can play with eventually? And
that's the goal. And they could generate their own kind of random characters.
Oh, this looks incredible. A lot of what I do is based on panoramic imagery. I like to position myself within the space and just kind of think about what experiences am I trying to invoke, what sense am I trying to create. I'll try to move away from just consuming the virtual space to actually having agency and actually influencing it. So this was a space that I created kind of using those techniques for the Remix exhibition. This is a piece called The Black House, and it's a kind of reinterpretation of the White House with kind of imagery of protests mixed with kind of pop culture. It will make it much more of an interesting space when there's creation as well as experience.
This is DALL-E text to image. Slap in any text and see what pops out. How to do an artist watch me work live. How to do an artist watch me work live if you're a performance artist. How to do an artist watch me work live if you're a queer performance artist. How to do an artist watch me work live if you're an aging queer performance artist. Okay, so you know the TV show The Mentalist? I've renamed it The Menopausalist and redoing that opening title sequence.
Okay.
So really just kind of working with these different images. What are these images made of, and how many images are they made of? The ethics, like not only are things kind of coming from, if it's image based, how are these images, aggregated and spit out? If they are scrubbing for Creative Commons content, fair dealing and fair use, that they're using that to be able to use the internet as a data set, as opposed to things that are flagged. Who are you collaborating with as an artist?
I am not an image maker, so for me, I'm inspired by the stuff around me, and the hunt, the search, like the image, the search and find stuff around existing things, objects, images. This is a poster now through Jesse in Creative Commons, created by the artist Swoon. This is the Google Cardboard that I was playing with. So I've embedded some video in the eyes, and then I've played with some PNGs to kind of get this kind of 3-dimension, so you can wear it as a digital mask, trying to play with the push the limits of what Artivive can currently do in terms of getting a 3D effect from a 2D image.
Wow. The soundbite process, I have to commend you, must have been crazy. There was so much in each and every one of those.
Oh, yes.
Just the weight of knowledge, just absolute tons. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, and there's so many, I wanted to just make a little, I could have made probably a 5-minute mashup of just collage, remixing, collage. I
with overlapping themes, right? In a way, just the pulling together of different sources.
Go to the next slide, and I'm going to some next video. Sorry. Yeah. Is there a moment that sticks out for you from all of the episodes, not having gone through all the footage?
Yeah. So for me, I think so first of all, the overlapping themes, I think was something that I was really kind of quite delighted to see in terms of just these approaches that we all had, which is all kind of a playful approach by using reimagining the materials in a new way. And for me, because again, it touches on my own work process, it was just amazing seeing that kind of agency. It's similar to a lot of street art techniques, right? It's kind of being able to either reinterpret the surface or reinterpret the media to then apply to that surface. I think it's just Scorpion Dagger was definitely up there with just watching him invent a new character. So he infusing kind of narrative, which you did get with Sonia Mambu's like cinematic. There is narrative through all of them, but I quite like the kind of the use of humor in creating these and reimagining a very unexpected, an unexpected relationship to these classical pieces. You just have to look at his Instagram.
No, the idea of turning something on its head. Yeah, and we talked about this in most of them as well, like the fun and, like you said, the playful. And then you had mentioned in when I was showing my work, I had gotten into some work that had some really like deep meaning, and we were talking about how both the deep and the totally like experimental play are equally legitimate.
Totally.
And that's something that's
madness for sure.
And that's something that kind of like typifies the internet, the way that the internet functions as well, right? That there's always like serious, really heavy things rubbing up against like really funny things, and that's can be a kind of jarring experience, but it's kind of a collage like one for sure. I've just got this little quote here about, because again, collage was such a big one that went through it, and from Danielle Crissa, who wrote Collage: Contemporary Artists Hunt and Gather, Cut and Paste, Mash Up and Transform. Starting with something and building on it is a chance to remake stories, to create art out of something rather than nothing. And that's really what I meant when I said, like, I am an image maker. Like, I've kind of thinking about that after, like, sorry?
I said most definitely.
What I mean is I don't sit down, like, I'm not able to interpret light with a pencil. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, like, I start with an idea and I make images, but I don't start from the blank page. I don't start from nothing, I don't start from, I'm picturing this person and I'm going to start drawing the hair and the light is hitting their, I'm thinking, okay, now where can I go find this thing to then use and, manipulate. And there's some great quotes from you, actually. I wanted to go to that one first.
Just while you're kind of getting that, I think the element of discoveries definitely, and because you know something's out there, right? You know that there's a piece of imagery that can align with what you're making as an image maker, and I think that that route of discovery is definitely adds something in itself to the process and the end art piece for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of like when Kofi's talking about messing with coding language. Is the whole thing then becomes about like what is the nature of language, and how do we create these surface meanings for meaning is similar in this archival, because when you're searching through archives and you're using found stuff, the rubber hits the road at some point. There's gaps, right? Like you easily identify the gaps, and some of them reflect like cultural like gaps, like in bias and representation, and others are just thinking about, again, generative AI recently, and just like how would I if I would ever use that. And it's like there's lots of times where I'm looking for something in a 3D image library, or even 2D, but 3D more so because it's younger, and it's just not there. But I'm like, oh, now I could get this thing to like make this fire hydrant.
Like, sure, you can scan it. There's so many ways to capture now, right?
Capture, that was a word that I thought of a lot when I was going through this stuff. Going to play some of these quotes that you talk about, the nature of collage.
Because I think like kind of combining the realistic with and the just the abstract and everything's quite a nice way to I don't know, just to create something just kind of unique to your own experience. And that's kind of what I like about collage as well, is that you can kind of just combine different aspects together, and then just end up with something completely unique. There we go. Get this here.
It's that paper.
There we are. So
I love it. Is that a photograph of a paper of a magazine?
yes, yeah, that's right. So you could scan. I like to kind of take scans and stuff and bring those in.
Oh, I
And so
love
it creates this kind of collage versus kind of digital. So I think one thing I really like is, there's an opportunity to have this, analog aesthetics in how the space is created that I think can be lost when, we rely just purely on digital like it's kind of, whether it's, finding photographs and it's how we remix and reuse what we already have. That's kind of informed how I work quite a lot. Like a lot of the things I sculpt are very kind of complex, the shapes and the forms. And so you end up with that combination, Photoshop for painting, and then you apply some of the painting textures onto a physical surface. You cut out things in collage, you scan them on a computer, you put them in on the, it's kind of those
back into the analog, back into the keep putting it through, keep putting it through that intermediate, that, and see what comes out the other side, like the fly. Yeah, collage, mixed reality. Yeah,
and I know you love that kind of thing. I remember, even last week, seeing just your process in, finding something interesting in the street and then reimagining that by augmenting it, in Artivise and adding the different layers. So I just think it just makes for a much more interesting, technical and virtual experience.
Yeah, I love those clips because it made me, think a lot about it in the context of licensing and the conundrum of the collage presents in terms of where does the original, where do the boundaries of these things, right? Like this is one thing that I didn't make and another thing that I didn't make, but the third thing is something I made, right? Like it becomes its own thing.
Yeah. And I remember some of the language we used for that. We almost used like a hereditary language, you have the great grandmother of this particular piece, and so there is still an unbreakable connection to the original piece of artwork, but it's but that new piece of artwork's a new piece, a new person, and so I think there's a very that dichotomy is definitely one we're wrestling with, even with generative imagery, right? That alone blew my mind, just some of the questions that raised. I think it was the generation of a Mickey Mouse image that brought a lot of questions during that episode, because it's referencing it's referring to a real life reference, but it's original in its creation. So it's very,
Well, and there's all kinds of stuff already. There's some battles about whether or not, how artists can get paid from the because those data sets are being taken from places that do represent people's labor, and it's very interesting. It's the reason why open culture should exist, right? Like if people are like, well, why? Like, why should we? Not the messy stuff necessarily. The messy stuff is the result of it, and the side and our work to kind of work through, right?
Yeah, for sure.
What can this look like? How can this look like? How can this be ethical? How can this be cool? How can we? But certainly the alternative to to not have access to not be able to make those third things, because of some kind of linear boundaries around that hierarchy, or that kind of grandmothering of grandfather licensing, if you will.
Just for the record, that's not what I'm advocating. Can you imagine grandfathering in copyright of that would be some if lawyers of the future are a real headache, unless they're all AI robots, in which case they'll be fine.
Right.
That's a great point as well, right? That you can box in the process if it's kept within, and then how can that then branch off into something else or a new piece? yeah, I always think of like some of Banksy's art pieces back home in England, and some of those original like references that were appropriated into stencil form or wheat pasted onto a wall. It's got a new life of its own. It's I'm appreciating that's definitely a something we need
like
to
how much
think about.
I can't even imagine how much art would not even exist. Like, we all know as artists that that's how you first fall in love with it, even decide to tell a story of your own is by through other people's stories and through access to these things and interest into these people. And then like, interest in one person and then, reading an interview with them and, finding out who they're into and then checking out who they're, and kind of all of that pool of influence,
Yeah, for sure. We're more connected than we like to think.
And that's messy. It's messy. Yeah. Our connections are messy, right? Sometimes we overstep, or we feel we're so connected to the things we create. We might the same thing might be taken in two different contexts, and one might feel respectful and one might feel like robbery. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're only an inch apart.
Yeah, so I'm gonna play this little clip actually as well, because I think we plugged the as a look behind the screens with digital artists, and there was just so much real world analog, you know what I mean? Like there was every one of us was like, well, yeah, but it's like it's a back and forth, and and the tactile was very much in there. I think I got the right clip here.
Gosh, yeah, but and that's why people always they're like, oh, like analog or digital, and I'm like, why not both? It doesn't have to be one or the other. They can live harmoniously, and I think dependent on the project, one would call for analog, one can call for digital, or for both. And I think also the blending of the analog and the digital, where it's like we have all of these physical things that we were using, but then we're scanning them to make them digital, and then it's like we're preserving them within this digital space as well.
Yeah. What were some?
No, I love that quote. Just like why does there have to be like a back and forth, as if somehow the digital has no relationship to the analog. I think that was a great reference.
Yeah, especially again in the context of the AI and meta and all these things. Like, where does the sentient and sensory experience, multi-sensory experience of the world, how does it get translated in the digital, and then of course in the context of Creative Commons and licensing, all of these problems were born of the digital, right? I mean, this is the reason that the gatekeepers are upset, and that licensing is such a that there's so many things down on lock and key, is not to benefit per se the artist. So that's the way that they tend to sell it to us, but it's to deal with the shareability and the perfect copy of digital realities, right? Like once we scan something,
that's it. And that actually touches on one of the comments we have. So just a reminder, feel free to drop any questions and thoughts in the comments if your platform allows it. And so Nate Angel here asks, did any episodes focus on why creators might be motivated to contribute to the commons when they might also be looking to sustain their work? So I'll jump in first there. I think there was definitely kind of conversations around kind of like the contribution, although they focused mainly on the use of Creative Commons materials. But I think there's definitely an appreciation for that material existing and for the original production of that raw material to kind of do the work. But not a specific. I think that could be a whole episode on itself, really.
Absolutely.
Contribution. What do you think, on that?
Well, I think that it's interesting. I don't know if it's about the nature of archives and search engines and stuff, as opposed to like, I think with open source, like I think with yourself and Ko-fi, there was a lot more, I got the impression that you were a lot more in touch with the communities that were building the things that you're using. Right? Than say like my relationship with people on Pixabay. Now I have worked on projects where we have contributed directly to the commons, but it's true that that's not directly related to my own practice in terms of sustaining my own practice in terms of like making money. So yeah, how do we completely create a different economic connection between the value that arts and culture brings to the world and like cultural values and like financial value. I mean, web monetization, there's some interesting stuff going in that direction. Coil is certainly an interesting, that the Creative Commons is behind and supporting. That would be such a great, just an entire.
Yeah.
I mean, it would almost need to be a brainstorm. I'm not even sure it's a panel or I know that I've talked to people about how, James in particular, Scorpion Dagger, because his stuff gets shared a lot, and he gets a lot of flags and a lot of messages from friends and colleagues being like, hey, this person like ripped off your style, or they did this, or they're like fully started a Tumblr back in the day of Tumblr, or fully an Instagram, or they're they've got stuff on Giphy that's got their own watermark on it that's yours, and I mean that's incredibly tough. Though at the same time, he doesn't sue with those people. You know what I mean? Right. He doesn't go after them. He has reached out to some folks before, being like, "Hey, what are you doing?" So in some senses, without flagging or like actually marking things with a license, a lot of that stuff is open, but it's not deliberately in the way that I think Nate is asking, right? It hasn't been deliberately chosen to, okay, I'm going to take what I've made and I'm going to deliberately contribute it for the use of, for other people's use. Though, again, I mean, Cory Doctorow writes a lot about this. There's a lot of stuff in just the nature of, like obviously the tone and the nature of Scorpion Dagger's work is not, don't mess with this or I'm going to sue you. You know what I mean? Like it's playful. It invites other people to play. But in terms of making that direct, does having that tone and allowing people to play and not suing people relate in any way to his sustainable living? Not really. Though influencers, that is kind of a model, you know what I mean? In the sense that like, they produce a lot of work for free and that's not how they pay to sustain their practice, right? It's not, they're not getting paid from Instagram.
Yeah. And it's that particular context of your I guess where you are in your journey as an artist or creator, and how that distribution impacts you, as part of your sustenance, because as creators, that there has to be that that mutual edification where you're able to continue your work and eat. But it's I think, as you said, like it's brainstorm panel. I mean, that's great. Definitely giving us some thoughts about what's gonna potentially be coming next. So I appreciate the question.
Yeah, I mean, micropayment. I mean, I'll say this to anybody who listens, and to the stranger at the red light. I mean, that's the promise. I mean, that's the unfulfilled promise for me as far as the internet 30 years later, which is just the micro, like being able to like create stuff for an audience, global audience, and only need like a penny from a fraction of the global world who might be seeing my stuff to be able to sustain, right? Sure. So it's like, I don't need the intermediary of the gallery and the collector. I don't need to sell stuff just to rich people or just to crypto owning folks, but that, folks can see my work. I can continue to do my work. I can continue to eat and be housed, and then for sure, like, have it all be open. You know what I mean? Like, absolutely, use it, play it, do whatever you want with it. I'm good, and I'm gonna keep creating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Big dreams.
Yeah, big questions as well. So
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, and so I just got this is still here. It's just of Dana's work. Just again to kind of, even when we're talking about the AI, generative AI, or these image libraries, we're never quite just taking it and just purely reusing it, like in the way that someone might reuse something for like a flyer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
I'm just taking this image. Like, we're always taking it, and then, so she's playing with AI, and then she's pulling it into Photoshop, and she's making video art out of it that fits within, much larger parts of her process, right? And her practice. Let's see what we got next. Making something with someone and someone's.
There we go.
This was, again, I think
definitely a key theme.
Yeah. There's stuff in here that I didn't put in here, but Sonia talked about a practice where they send somebody they know creates the collage. I don't want to get this wrong. Or the other person sends just a poem or sends the audio. They basically make these works separately. For a period of time, and they don't communicate about it. And the image, one of them makes the image and one of them makes the audio, and then these works are what they are. But here's one. I think a couple of themes about making something from someone else's stuff was definitely crowdsourcing. So again, kind of like putting a call out to engage people to create a pool or an archive instead of just trying to search what's out there already, right?
And it creates a tighter connection as well to the contributor, and there's the attribution is more than just a name. You have a person that you can reach out to when you need something in the future, and I think there's a great value in that I find in my own work as well. Like, just
to do was I started to I don't want to tease you with this guy here. I started to, so for this next iteration, I started to keep track of my dreams. And so every time I wake up, I'm like recording my dream of sleeping. And I also have been playing around with avatars, like Snapchat avatars. So where, I can turn myself into basically a princess face while I'm talking. And so this is on my website. So using these, like you can be a potato, or you can be a drag queen, or you can be a chicken, or just interested in this, how, and these seams of like how, I'm interested in all these seams. But then I started thinking about, well, like, is it at all interesting for what other people are dreaming? So I started collecting other people's dreams and started playing around with, now these aren't open source, these are, proprietary companies, but you can do some free samples. So this is a dream my sister shared with me. And again, a similar concept to the DALL-E, except it's a text to AI actor. So this is, originally a real person that has been captured, and, however their proprietary software works, so that you can type in a script and this AI actor will recite it. So this is an 11-second dream.
I dreamt I lived in a teenage trailer and was playing shuffleboard, and some kid flipped someone's trailer on fire to a gun and was happy that neighbors was avoiding the camera.
Right. So there's, so one of the things that I'm interested in with this is that it's just weird, right? It's not super refined. It's not super polished. And here's another one.
Oops, I just go fully back to the beginning. My bad.
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
quite a
man,
cool
that's-
process, right? Like it was literally reaching out to friends and family and hearing that yeah, I guess in a way the prompts came from yeah, like the source of the prompts was definitely part of that process.
Yeah, and the putting it through the technology, right? Like again, taking
Yeah.
these kind of very human, intimate experiences. You know, and over the pandemic, there's been, you know, like what was that? What's that one? The audio, social media, whatever. But just kind of like, you know, deconstructing parts of technology and using technology to again tell these kind of human stories and to kind of context shift, like take something from one space and again we're kind of talking collage again, but it just in an installation kind of Duchamp ready-made kind of way. But you know, what if I took this thing from here and put it through this thing? But you know, in this case, all using technology, right? Which also is another factor, like adds another interpretation.
And with that example, the AI generated presenters, they're marketed generally for like courses or you know, it's almost kind of got this kind of very corporate use case. Like, I mean, they don't really plug these artistic uses. It's kind of quite interesting to see someone say, hey, you know what would be really cool is if one of these avatars recited one of my uncle's dreams. And I think it's I think it's this experimentation that pushes out these use cases that a lot of these startups probably hadn't kind of thought about or considered.
Which kind of comes back to Nate's question in the sense that, like, yeah, like it's the technology and the creation without the market forces. Like the reason they don't imagine those things is because they're thinking about how is this a business, right? How is this going to make money, right? Within the current like economic system. And artists are like, look what I can do with this. See if I can make some weird thing and like, you know, impress my 5-year-old, as I was saying, or like creep out my, you know, like my partner, or like just kind of, you know, or make an easier version of something I'm trying, some big dream I have about for an upcoming exhibit, but like this is the compromise, you know what I mean? Like let me see if I can just mix these two things.
Or sometimes it's just simply a case of just wanting to push something to its limit, which is its own artistic method. I've seen with a lot of, they really want to, like, how far can I push this technology? I think we are seeing that with dare I say ChatGPT. They'll put it in a swear jar.
You gotta put a penny in the jar.
You see a lot of really interesting, like it's the obscure. I think is part of that progress, because it pushes into the unexpected corners of the parameters that were set in the first place.
Okay, I know we said we're not going to talk about ChatGPT, but I should say, I mean, one of the things I was reading a bunch of time, I was like, oh, I can't see ever using this. And then I realized that you can, because I find the most interesting AI stuff works with your own archives, right? Like, you know, like you do. And I read something that was saying like, yeah, you could get it to write your first draft, right? From your own mess of notes. And I was like, oh my God, like that is a dream. Because that's the toughest part. Like, you know, once there's a draft, then you can be like, okay, this sentence isn't working, or this is repetitive, or whatever, right? Yeah. I was like, okay, ChatGPT, let me spend some time. Just peruse the, the reason I had this image up was just because this was, again, crowdsourced. The audios for this, for the love letters installation was all crowdsourced people's audios about and yeah, it's a great way to, again, engage, you know, in open, accessible, you know, open, not in the licensing necessarily, you know, open versus closed kind of dichotomy, but just open in terms of like art is for everyone. Creative, you know, creative processes and collaboration is for everyone. And a lot of people, which is again, probably contributes to the you know, museum industrial complex and the way that art is seen by the mainstream versus like, the playfulness that you were talking about, you know, people like, I can't make something, I'm not an artist. And it's like, well, we can all, put these things together and create something that is art.
Sure.
Go to the next slide. Oh, why are you doing that?
The next slide song. Okay.
Sorry. I have a song for everything. I know you know this now.
That's it.
New parent.
We did say audio was one of the art forms in.
This is true. This is you talking about, again, communities.
Cool.
Details that you can just kind of integrate within the three-dimensional space. I'm taking that collage idea and just applying it in a three-dimensional kind of approach.
I love it.
So let me try and export the example that we were looking at before, the power piece. So it'll recognize which one's back, which one's down, front, left, right, and up. If you use this, do buy him a coffee.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, I got a coffee before, so. And if you just wait a second and find your download, you'll get something that kind of looks like this.
Hey, that is very interesting.
So I think these are beautiful images because it's like we were talking about, like pulling it apart and kind of getting that view. So these are kind of this is the basic language that you're kind of communicating to your API or your viewer to just navigate this. And with a bit of clever maths, you're able to navigate this as a space. So
clever math. Is that what you said, or clever masks?
Maths, like yeah, clever maths. So the best way, this is kind of really quick fire, to then turn that into something you can look at online, you need like an online viewer. So this is just a big shout out to all these amazing people that have created these free things. So Penello is made by someone from MIT that just kind of created a free version for people to use panoramas on the web. So this is an example of one of these that was created, and there's a great community. Like I've been in touch with the developer and just kind of suggested things. Matthew Petrov's the guy, and just developing this kind of version after version to just allow just new features and new ways of using it. So it's quite a lightweight and simple kind of a panoramic viewer, but it's the one that I used in developing like the remix with a lot of additional CSS and JavaScript coding. But at the basic level, it can allow you to start to kind of create that panorama.
So what we're just looking at there was that.
Sorry. I don't know how to.
Cool. Yeah. Open source, even just like just software programs, and it's funny looking back at that because I think I've like probably participated or used like another like 5 pieces of open source software. Like just it's a great. It's a self enriching community. Community is massive, I think, for a lot of these. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And is it? Yeah, I can only imagine what some of those community. Like, are you speaking directly with the creator a lot of the times, or
it's all on GitHub. I mean, you know, it's kind of identifying queries, potential upgrades. A lot of these. Yeah, it's quite amazing. Like sometimes there'll be just code updates that someone's found. Like, hey, it took me 2 lines of code, but I've added a new feature to this. Developers, great. You know, they've literally put that into an update and re-released it. And I think it's that speed at which something can just grow because there's a community of people contributing with the freedom to be able to do that. And it just has the traction because people are kind of able to benefit from it. It's an amazing kind of model, you know, when it works well. And one that I definitely advocate.
Mm. I like the caveat of when it works well, because I'm sure sometimes it's terrifying.
Hey, every like you said, you know, it's sometimes it's messy, and that's just how how it goes sometimes, how the river goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Another, we're at 8:20 here, so I'm gonna move on to the next,
Cool.
which is archives, our own archives. Like we
Yep.
saw some amazing files and hard drives, and had some conversations about how many tabs do you have open, and all this kind of
Too many.
managing, the relationship with the need for the computer to collaborate, and not crash, and just for working and reworking some of these stories. So there's a great this is Sonia.
And I always like to say everything that like I need to say has already been said. So I just sort of take, the parts that, resonate with me and, resonate with the story that I'm trying to tell, and then remix them and layer them and rearrange them in a way that fits for how I would have said it.
So as a remixer, that last point, so this might be
I have to pause it every time. Yeah, again, kind of back to the collage piece of
yeah. I like
borrowing to build.
How it was phrased as like what Sonia needed to say kind of had been said. Is this that recognition of like we talk about reinventing the wheel, and maybe it's we kind of forget that a lot of artistic themes, as well as because you talk a lot about the image, like the product, and then reinterpreting, but sometimes the reuse can even mean that the core meaning of the artwork communicates something of what you're still trying to communicate. And so I think her work's great because it kind of and I'm a big like Breakfast Club fan, lots of like all these classic films, and I like how she took like the dance, the famous dance scene. I'm not going to imitate the dance, but she kind of got her own cast in there, a cast of color, and had them do this, and it wasn't any less a social experience or an experience of dance, but it had this layered meaning that kind of communicated the artist's identity. And so it's I think there's the meaning as well as the piece that was a really interesting conversation in her work as well.
Yeah, and they went on to talk about like audio clips of James Baldwin and really again, this kind of like in the context of race and representation, like having to repeat oneself, like the same issue, right? Like and being able to use words of the past, and bringing them into the present in a way that is new, because the context is new and the time period is new, and But yeah, we definitely also talked about managing our own archives within digital environments with evolving file format norms. So we talked, about like losing stuff, or like stuff that we have that's not, that's a link, or link rot, or like platforms, having to switch platforms, and this kind of stuff. And I thought
hot linking.
Yeah, Kofi said some really interesting stuff about VHS and such. Oh, is this the right clip?
No. And whenever you see me copy, that is because I always save my code somewhere. Always.
How do you
Google
save them?
Docs, Notepad, video.
Oh, okay.
I always make sure I have a copy of almost everything I write.
Oh, so how much do you have? How big is that file?
For poetry, it's like in the thousands, most likely. Code, probably thousands. I do every iteration. Like right now, I just saved 2 of the ones that we did online here have already been saved in a file.
And you just save them to the cloud. Do you back them up anywhere else?
Oh yeah, double back down on servers if I'm on the road. So yeah, so that was just a little nice intro music, right?
That's actually not the clip I was referring to, but
yeah, just a throwaway comment, you know. That's great. Yeah, double backup. Big shout out Notepad. I love it. It's yeah, living digital.
Yeah, and then searching your own files. Yeah, this is a picture of James's extensive of Scorpion Dagger. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
This is the quote where he says that. Yeah, and I've seen his files when I worked with him, learned from him 2018. Cool. And yeah, just like files upon files of like arms, like heads, ears, butts, like just like everything. Which makes sense because once you take the time to clean it up and cut it out and stuff, you definitely want to hold on to it, but you got to be able to find it. I mean, naming things.
Got to be walk through your own museum.
Yes. I think this is the one where he talks about Nintendo and some of the things that worked in the 90s. No, that's not possible. Sorry.
No, you're percent.
Okay.
I'm just making sure that because I have my two monitors up, so
same here. So
you folks are on this side, but my camera's over here.
I have the same thing. Like there's a camera right there, and every time someone like, "What are you looking at?" and I usually have to start off and be like,
"My camera's over here."
I have the same thing. Like there's a camera right there, and every time someone like, "What are you looking at?" and I usually have to start off and be like,
"My camera's over here."
Seem to have mistaken the clip there. I'm sorry.
That's still a great reference. It's
sorry about that. There is a wonderful clip.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not sure where it is.
You can always describe the.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's just talking about how. I mean, the reality that we all know, but he talks about in specific things that I'm sure would be of interest to some net art and technology, technologists, geek, I say lovingly. But, he was talking about stuff that I'm not too familiar with in terms of gaming, but things that you could, like the way that like games and cartridges and Nintendo stuff was made back in the day where you could, it was participatory, you know what I mean? Like media in terms of like, you could do things with it and change things with it. And I guess kind of like the early days of Facebook when they had people making the games, right? Like it was open and you could just, create like Pet Rescue or whatever, because they were just kind of seeing, first up the wall, like what are people into, what engages people.
Those days. Yeah.
And he was just saying, you can still use that stuff. You can still get one of those machines and it's still accessible, but there's so much stuff since then and in between then that is gone, that has this really short lifespan because of file formats changing or because of platforms or so you don't, you lose your own stuff. And then we all lose that stuff because if that's open culture, right? Like and the archives become more shallow.
Yeah. And there could almost be a feature just on like the use of like emulators in work as well, because I think I've seen quite a few online emulators that can like time machine you back to like old browser versions and old gaming consoles and different formats to kind of just recreate, and it's very. I mean that would be very interesting to know, like if there are any kind of artists, creators, makers that do rely on emulators to kind of maintain their formats as close to historic formats as possible. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to. Yeah, that would be
that would
great.
be cool. And if there were any Nintendo games in there, I would be game 100%.
Well, yeah, I was working with someone this week who I should connect you guys, who's been working in VR since 35 years.
Wow.
Studying.
They were probably involved in like another life and those early days. Yeah.
And they were describing it all as browser based and stuff like that. And then we were just talking about like USBs and hard drives and like just floppy disks and just stuff like your work, like files. It's like I still have my portfolio from like university, you know what I mean? Like my paper, like portfolio of like stuff that I had to draw and paint. But my own digital stuff, like I've had a couple of losses along the way. And particularly as it relates to the cloud, was interested reading something interesting in Wired the other day that was talking about exactly that. Like, one, the environmental impact of like where these actual farms, like where the cloud actually physically lives, right?
Especially if it's underwater.
Yeah, and it's horrible for the people around. It gives like headaches. It's like super loud. Or they're like in the middle of these deserts, and but also
noise pollution for a few mining facilities, crypto mining.
Yes, and if Google, like if this cloud, like again, same thing with blockchains or whatever, like they're not, some next giant might take over this current giant, right? Like, I mean, it makes our fate tied to let's say the Google's cloud or whatever in a very dangerous way, because if they've been dominant for a certain while, then we all have an interest in them maintaining dominance because our work is within their stuff.
Yeah.
And it was talking about quipus. Do you know what a quipu is?
No. Tell me about it.
A quipu is a Peruvian, like Incan. It's like a document. It's a coded. It's a like an abacus of like textiles, kind of. But it was a document, right? Like an Excel. That's quipu. Sorry. That they used to, that Incas used to walk around like South America with, that contains information, like you can decode it, right? Because the knots each represent something. And they were talking about how we have to do that in the context of digital lives.
So cool. I've actually got it's like what's a Zambian version and Congolese. It's called the Lukasa, Lukasa, and it was a generational storytelling device, and it looks Lukasa memory. If you just put like memory board, and it's that's the one. And it would tell stories over generations by having very trained individuals within the village would be able to navigate this physical board and then tell you generational stories through it. It's quite cool how like hardware has just been in like a lot of our cultures, just kind of in different hardwired formats, right?
How dangerous it is to not. They were talking about cold storage versus hot storage, and that if we don't have things that actually exist, like cave drawings, and you know what I mean, that we won't. That again, the loop shortens, right? And our own our history becomes even more shallow. So it's like, we've got all of this digital abundance and technology and archives, but they have no longevity. Like
that's right. Yeah, that's such a that's
kind of terrifying.
Cool.
Well, we also have one little last slide where we were just kind of some of our takeaways about open culture. And I don't know if there's any more folks that have joined us. If they have any questions, I do like to respect end times. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to say, or just.
There's no kind of new kind of comment questions, just kind of come on in. But if anyone does have any, can probably throw some in. But I was just gonna say, you kind of know where we are. Like, so we're always on the lookout for people, artists, creators, makers who are in that space and have these questions. And as we kind of plan the next, cohort for the next season, do reach out. Would love to hear from you, and who knows, you could be up here next.
Mm-hmm. And sponsors as well. We would love to hear from you.
Certainly would.
Yes, always. Amazing. Yeah, folks out there working and interested in this, or if anybody has the answer to Nate's query as well about how we can what might encourage them, or maybe you are somebody who does create for the commons. Again, there is apparently in the Unicode there is a text, like we can access actually the different CC licenses within the type. Like I would love to see that mainstreamed, where people actually, influencers or otherwise, were always flagging whether it was, because we do have some kind of language for that in social media in terms of editing and in terms of little camera icons and for photo credit or whatever. But if we could bring in the language of the CC licenses and kind of make that colloquially understandable by the masses, that might be a really great first step. Yeah, certainly. It's and I mean, even just with a lot of talk on using cryptography to identify, and who knows how that may coalesce or combine with some of the open data out there. So it's I look forward to more of these. I think already there's probably like 6 topics, big questions. I'll probably be dreaming about them this evening. Definitely. Yeah. And then you write it down, you tell it to an AI, and we'll see what the AI interprets it. And then someone else will reach out to you and be like, hey, I heard your AI telling your dream.
And then AI presents it.
Let's make it come together.
I mean, even stuff like voice cloning, I think that's like kind of strange and beautiful and kind of interesting at the same time. Like the ability to teach a computer how you speak. So then it's kind of it's an interesting one. It's but again, that's if there's any voice cloning artists or who've given their voice digitally.
Listen, I was just telling my friend yesterday, whose child is about to go to daycare, that my neighbor's cat can imitate my child. And it's really messed up. Like, so if the cat can do it, like the cat's like, mama, like does like just messes with me when I'm trying to work the day. So when I'm like, what? Wait a second, she's in school. So definitely we can get machines to. I can see Nate saying he's grooving on our conversation, so we're very happy about that.
I was just gonna say that I'm sure machines don't have the same incentive to control people as cats do. So,
well, it depends. Yeah, it's the company. The incentive that bake in the incentive.
Speaking of cats, so. Cool.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Nate, for some of your comments. I hope that folks join the conversation. And some of it, he's making some suggestions and talking about some folks who do certainly contribute specific themed work. So I guess like maybe parts of their collection. Portrait photographer. When AI jumps in his lap is when he'll start to get worried. Yeah. Well, yeah, it won't sit on your computer typewriter, though. I guess keep it.
Can be taken many ways. But yeah, definitely.
Well, thanks for joining us. Anybody who's watching this from the future, who didn't join us live, but who checks us out tomorrow, or in the coming weeks, reach out. We are here and very interested in continuing these conversations on and on, forever and ever.
Totally. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sam. It's been so much fun so far doing these with you, and I'm so glad that we got the ball rolling in 2021.
+2.
All right.
All
You
right.
take care, and everybody out there take care. And thank you to Creative Commons 20th anniversary grant program. Yeah.
All right.
Nice. Cheers.
See you all soon.